As I sift through the yellowed pages of my life, I stumble upon that old diary, the one I thought was lost forever. It's funny how time tugs at our memories, weaving threads of joy and sorrow into a tapestry that feels so real, yet so distant. The ink blurs as I trace the lines, particularly the love letter tucked between pages, a whisper from a heart that never found its way to me. I had always felt the sting of abandonment, as if love was a distant mirage, never quite within reach. The letter speaks of promises made under starlit skies, of dreams unfulfilled, and of a love that should have been mine. But as I read, I realize every what if is a path not taken, and perhaps the love I yearned for was never meant to be. With the weight of a lifetime in my hands, I wonder if it's too late to embrace the love I missed. Before I go on, subscribe to the channel. Here, we tell stories no one else does. Stories of grandmas and grandpas the world tried to silence. The air in my small, creaking house is thick with the scent of old wood and faded memories. Dust dances in the soft light that filters through the frayed curtains, casting gentle shadows across the worn floorboards. I find comfort in the familiarity of my surroundings, the nooks and crannies filled with remnants of yesteryears, the faded photographs, the delicate china that holds echoes of laughter, and the well-loved armchair that has borne witness to countless hours of reading and reflection. Each object tells a story, but none more so than the delicate diary that sits on my bedside table, its cover cracked and worn, the pages yellowed with age. It was on one of those languorous afternoons, the kind where the clock seems to stall, that I felt the urge to open it again. With a sigh, I picked it up, the familiar weight resting comfortably in my lap. There's a certain reverence that surrounds this diary, as though it holds not just my thoughts, but pieces of my soul. I remember when I filled it, each entry a brushstroke on the canvas of my life, capturing the laughter and tears, the hopes and regrets. And yet, there is one entry that I had never noticed before, a slip of paper that had settled in the pages, like a forgotten whisper waiting to be heard. As I unfolded the note, a wave of nostalgia washed over me. The handwriting was elegant, the words flowing like a gentle stream, and yet they brought with them an undercurrent of heartbreak that I had managed to bury deep within me. It was a love letter, though not one that I had ever received. My heart tightened as I read the words, feeling the longing and tenderness that poured from the ink. It was as if the past had reached out to me in that moment, bridging the gap between what was and what could have been. The letter was addressed to me, yet it remained unsent, an unfulfilled promise resting in the folds of time. Sitting there, enveloped in the stillness, I let the memories flood back. I could almost see him, the boy with bright blue eyes and a mischievous smile, standing in the sunlit garden outside my window. How the ivy twined around the wooden trellis, its leaves so lush and green, a stark contrast to the budding feelings I struggled to understand then. We were young, filled with a naive hope that life would always be as bright as those summer days spent in laughter and daydreams. Yet the world had a way of pulling us apart, of sweeping away the innocent beginnings of a love story that was never fully written. I felt a bittersweet ache in my chest as I realized how easily moments slip away, how quickly time can erase the things we hold dear. The letter had traveled through the years, unacknowledged, the words untouched, left to linger in the space between us like an unplayed song. So many chances lost to uncertainty and the relentless passage of time. With trembling fingers, I placed the letter back inside the diary, feeling the weight of unspoken words pressing down on my soul. In that quiet moment, surrounded by the remnants of my life, I understood that this was not just a story about love. It was about the silent echoes of what might have been, an unsent letter that had become a haunting reminder of all the roads not taken. As I sit here, the afternoon sun filtering through the yellowed curtains, I can't help but drift back to the woman I once was, the girl with bright eyes and dreams that seemed to stretch beyond the horizon. Back then, love felt like a tangible thing, something I could grasp, something that could wrap its arms around me and lift me to the stars. I remember the soft whispers of summer winds, the laughter echoing among the trees, the feeling of being alive. I was almost reckless in my pursuit of joy, chasing after sweet moments that felt infinitely precious. But time, as it often does, shifted its weight, and my life started to unravel in ways I never anticipated. I can still feel the sharp sting of disappointment when I think of the letters I never sent, the words I never spoke. I had penned countless messages with trembling hands, filled with hopeful confessions that crumbled beneath the weight of my fear. I was full of longing, convinced that the world would conspire against me if I revealed my heart. I let opportunities slip away like fine sand through my fingers, thinking that perhaps someday I'd find the courage to reach out. But that day never came. Now, as I flip through the pages of Grandma's lost diary, I face the stark reality of who I have become. I am a woman shaped by time and choice, molded by the decisions I made and those I put off. I am no longer the girl who dreamed of a love that would sweep her off her feet. Instead, I find myself in a cocoon of solitude, surrounded by memories that speak of what could have been. The loneliness has grown deeper as the years passed, leaving echoes of the laughter I once shared with friends, lovers, and family. I often wonder, had I chosen differently, would my life have been filled with the passionate love I yearned for, or perhaps it was meant to be this way? The irony is that I've become an expert at convincing myself that I am content. I tell others that I've found solace in my solitude, that I've learned to embrace the peace of my silence. Yet, there are nights when I lie awake, the weight of unsent letters pressing against my chest like an anchor. I hear the sounds of laughter from the past, feel the warmth of arms that were never wrapped around me. I think of the love I never claimed, and the words that swirled in my mind like autumn leaves caught in the wind. Could it be that the greatest tragedy of my life is not that I waited too long, but that I never knew how to love myself enough to stand in front of my own heart? Rediscovering Grandma's diary has stirred something deep within me, a mix of nostalgia and regret, but also a renewed sense of purpose. I see now that I must honor the woman I was, not by dwelling in the past, but by acknowledging the lessons it holds. It's a call to finally recognize that love doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures or sweet promises. Sometimes, love is found in the simplest moments: a smile shared with a stranger, a warm breeze on a chilly evening, or in the quiet acceptance of oneself. Perhaps it's not too late to reach out, to write those letters and send them to the universe as a testament to all that I am, all that I have lived through, and all that I still desire. In this moment of clarity, I realize my journey isn't over yet. I can still find the courage to rekindle the flame of love in my heart, not just for others, but for myself. The diary has become a mirror, reflecting not just the choices I made, but the woman I still aspire to be. As the sun begins to set, casting a golden hue across my dim living room, I feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps I can turn these pages of my life into a story I am proud of, one that celebrates the love that never reached me, but has now become a part of who I am. As I sat in my favorite armchair, the one that is molded to my body over years of use, I felt the weight of the past settle around me like a heavy quilt. I had just come across a small box tucked deep within the recesses of my closet. Inside it lay the remnants of my youth, forgotten trinkets, photographs of faces long gone, and the yellowed pages of a diary that had once been filled with my dreams and desires. But it was a single letter, yellowed and fragile, that drew me in like a moth to a flame. It was a letter addressed to me, though it had never reached my hands. How could something so potent, a promise of love and longing, be lost to time? Many days have passed since my heart first swelled with the feelings that letter summoned. Back then, everything felt vivid and alive, drenched in a palette of emotions I can hardly describe now. I remember the summer of my 16th birthday like it was yesterday, a time when the world felt so wide, yet so small. I had just met John, a boy with dark hair that danced in the summer breeze and eyes that sparkled like sunlight on water. He filled my mind and heart, and every glance he threw my way felt like a secret shared, a whisper of something deeper. He made the mundane feel magical, and every moment spent in his presence was an adventure, even if we were just sitting on the porch swing, watching the sun dip below the horizon. But life, as it tends to do, began to shift. The innocence of youth began to fray at the edges. I could sense changes in my family, in the way we communicated, or, more aptly, how we failed to communicate. My parents, who had once laughed together, now seemed to navigate around each other like ships in the night, burdened by silent arguments I could not comprehend. Their tension bled into my own world, casting shadows over my budding love for John. I often found myself clinging to the fleeting moments of joy with him, desperate to keep them from being swallowed by the chaos around me. Amidst this turbulent backdrop, I recall the day John and I shared that fateful kiss just beneath the old oak tree that stood guard at our neighborhood park. I can still feel the thrill that coursed through me, the sensation of the world falling away as our lips brushed. In that instant, I thought we were invincible, that nothing could ever come between us. But time proved to be a relentless tide. As the autumn leaves began to fall, I felt the first ripples of separation between us, as if an invisible line began to form. He started spending more time with friends who had different ideas of what mattered, and I became more absorbed in the turbulence at home. The letter, the one that had never been delivered, became a symbol of all that never got a chance to blossom. I couldn't help but wonder if it was an expression of his own unraveling thoughts, an unfiltered voice instead of the silence that engulfed us. Perhaps he had penned his feelings in a moment of vulnerability, only to lose the courage to share them with me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that my heartache wasn't solely due to my lost love, but also the lost moments we could have shared. Time melted away, leaving both of us to drift along different currents of life, with paths that seemed intertwined, yet ultimately separated by the simplest of things. A letter never sent, a promise left unspoken. And so, the change began, in ways I could never have foreseen. But the echoes of that love still haunt me, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes the heart can grasp at the intangible for a lifetime. I never expected to find that diary tucked away in the attic, hidden among boxes of memories, relics from my past. The pages were yellowed and fragile, each one a testimony to days long gone, yet somehow still vivid in my mind. As I leafed through the entries, my heart raced with recognition. It was like unearthing a long-forgotten treasure, a glimpse into a version of myself that I'd almost lost to time. But as I read, I found myself haunted by the words of a love I never felt I truly had. Love letters penned but never sent, months, even years of longing that never reached me. There was something profoundly sad about the silence surrounding those letters. Each one held the promise of connection, the thrill of possibility, yet they were never delivered, left to linger like an unspoken thought. I often wonder, what if those letters had found their way into my hands? Would my life have unfolded differently? Would I have embraced love with open arms, finally shattering the distance I placed between my heart and the world? Instead, I grew up in an environment where silence reigned, where feelings were tucked away lest they disrupt the delicate fabric of our daily lives. I remember the summers of my youth, spent on the porch as a child, listening to cicadas drone their songs in the heat. I would watch my mother, her gaze distant, as if she were lost in another realm, where her own dreams danced just out of reach, dreams she never shared with us. I learned early on that words could carry burdens heavier than silence, so I became adept at observing rather than speaking. The distance between us, both physical and emotional, became a chasm I didn't know how to bridge. It was a lonely existence, yet it was the only one I knew. Those unexpressed feelings became the rhythm of my life, unsung, unseen. It's a curious thing, this quiet ache for something that feels so near, yet remains maddeningly out of grasp. The letters, as I uncovered them, marked pivotal moments in my life, some about heartbreak, others filled with yearning, and a few detailing fleeting moments of joy. It pained me to think of the time lost, the opportunities to connect that slipped right through my fingers. I saw the names of people I had loved and lost, yet the letters were never delivered. They remained trapped in that attic, haunting me like ghosts of what might have been. I wonder if they felt the same void in their lives, the same distance that echoed through the silence between us. But now, looking back, I realize that silence speaks too. It tells stories of resilience, of waiting, of the strength found in longing. Though I was never able to send those letters, I know now that they were part of my journey. They shaped me, molded my understanding of love and connection. I also understand that distance is not always a physical space. It can dwell within our hearts, weaving through our thoughts and dreams until we can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. The love I searched for was always there, waiting patiently for me to discover it amidst the rubble of my past. I can only hope that others might learn to voice their feelings before time slips away. I can still remember that day vividly, with the sun dipping low in the sky, casting long shadows across the yard as I played with my friends. We were carefree children, our laughter ringing like silver bells as we chased each other around my grandmother's rose bushes. I had no idea then that the world could hold such heartache, but I learned that lesson far too early. It began with the arrival of a letter, not for me, but for my sister, Ellen. Ellen never really noticed me in those days, those golden afternoons filled with friendship and childish joy. I was the quieter one, content to watch from the sidelines while she bloomed into the center of attention. When I saw her face light up at this letter, I felt a pang of envy. It was addressed to her in a handwriting I recognized, one that belonged to Jimmy, the boy from next door. He had always favored Ellen with sweet smiles and flirty glances, leaving me to wonder if I would ever experience anything that even remotely resembled the affection that fluttered between them. That day, as Ellen busily opened the letter, I felt my heart beat faster in anticipation. It was as though I was ready to step into her world, to become a part of the romantic narrative that was unfolding right before my eyes. The words were cherished secrets, whispered promises, and the kind of adoration that sent shivers down my spine. But when Ellen's eyes widened, her smile faded, and I saw the glossy surface of disappointment creep across her face. It felt like a door had slammed shut between us. The letter was a confession of Jimmy's feelings, but it spoke of something else entirely. His heart belonged to someone else. Unbeknownst to her, in that moment, my heart cracked open a little too. I felt the weight of lost possibilities pressing down on me. There was always a part of me that wished to be loved as fiercely and openly as Ellen was. But that letter showed me how quickly love could slip through your fingers, like fine sand. I watched her fight back tears, a wizard of emotions, too young to understand the depth of what transpired. The innocence of youth began to unravel, and I found myself grappling with the sadness of unrequited love, even though it had not been aimed my way. Days turned into weeks, and the aftermath of that letter spiraled into a small storm in our house. While Ellen retreated into herself, I opened up, hoping to catch a glimpse of a different kind of love. I never told her that the aching in my chest felt all too familiar. I had my own unvoiced desires, buried beneath the burden of unspoken words and unacknowledged feelings. A few fleeting moments with boys left me skittish, and even while I played the part of the supportive little sister, I couldn't help but wonder if I, too, would ever find a love that was meant for me. As time marched on, I learned to navigate the bittersweet landscape of love in all its complexities. Losing the innocence of that day taught me more than I could have imagined. It was my first emotional blow, one that echoed through the hallways of my heart for years. The letter itself, still tucked away in old books, became a ghost of what could have been, haunting both Ellen and me in ways we never expected. It was a reminder of lost time and unsaid things, shaping both our paths down the years, changing the way we defined love and how it lingered just out of reach. As I sat down to organize the remnants of my past, the weight of time pressed heavily upon my fragile shoulders. I had been sifting through old boxes, dusty with memories, when I unearthed an intricately tied bundle of letters hidden within the folds of a moth-eaten shawl. My heart raced as I recognized my late husband's handwriting. A sense of dread and excitement swelled within me. In my younger years, I had spent countless evenings reading and rereading his letters, but these were different. They were addressed to someone else. Who was she? And why had he never spoken of her? The delicate paper crinkled in my hands as I gingerly unfolded the first letter. The familiar looping script danced before my eyes, but the words felt foreign. It was a love letter, filled with tenderness and longing, and yet the name at the bottom was not mine. Each line spoke of dreams unfulfilled and wishes that withered away in the shadows of unspoken truth. My heart sank with each revelation. The love I thought was ours suddenly felt diluted by this specter from the past. My hands trembled as I read about the passion he felt for her, a passion expressed so vividly that I could almost see the young man he once was, bursting with hopes and plans to build a life with someone who wasn't me. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images that invaded my mind. A younger version of Robert, laughing and carefree, sharing secrets with a girl who would never know the depths of his devotion to me. I remembered our own love story, how it had blossomed in a small town filled with innocence and laughter. But now, facing these letters, I felt a fragile layer of that history crack, letting in a flood of insecurities that I had buried long ago. How could I have been so blind? Did he carry this secret with him throughout our years together, hidden beneath the weight of our shared life? What else had he kept from me? As I continued to read, the letters painted a portrait of a love that might have been, trips not taken, promises unfulfilled, all tethered to a timeline that never converged with mine. The final letter left me breathless. It was dated just months before we had met. In it, Robert expressed a deep sorrow for her departure, as if she had slipped through his fingers like sand, leaving him no option but to move on. The sting of that realization cut deeper than I would have expected. I had never felt competition in our marriage. We were a team, unwavering in our commitment. Yet here I was, grappling with the painful knowledge that someone else had held his heart in a way that I hadn't known. Someone who had never fully disappeared from his thoughts. I placed the letters back inside the shawl and leaned back in my chair, overwhelmed by the torrent of emotions battling within me. Regret intertwined with anger. Yet there was a peculiar pang of sympathy for both Robert and the girl he had loved. How their lives had unfolded separately. And yet here I was, a third character in a narrative I didn't even know existed. My heart felt heavy with an ancient longing, a wish for clarity, but also a yearning to shield myself from the reality that we sometimes hide the parts of our past we wish to forget. In this moment, I was left wondering how many layers there were to our love, and how much was left unexamined as I sifted through years of shared joy and pain. The letter lay delicately curled between the pages of my old diary, a relic of a time when the world felt like it was bursting with possibility. I had come across it in a dusty corner of my attic, forgotten beneath years of accumulated memories. The paper, yellowed and fragile, held a certain weight, one that I hadn't anticipated when I decided to revisit my forgotten chapters. As I read the familiar handwriting, a shiver ran through me. It was as if a ghost had brushed against my skin. My heart tightened at the realization that this was a love letter never sent, a confession of feelings that had, in their silence, taken residence in my heart all those years ago. In my youth, I was filled with dreams, brimming with an eagerness to experience love in all its forms. But time, as it often does, twisted those dreams into something different. The letter was addressed to me from Robert, my high school sweetheart, a boy who made my heart race and the world feel alive. We shared stolen moments, secret glances, and the kind of laughter that echoed through the hallways of our school like an anthem of youth. Yet somehow, as I sat there in my quiet living room, I remembered feeling that our love was always held back by something greater than us, as if the universe conspired to keep us apart. Now, that letter unveiled a truth I had long buried, a confession of love that never bloomed, a wound that had never healed. I could feel the weight of regret take root as I reread each line, his words shimmering with sincerity and longing. He poured out his heart, expressing a desire to be with me, to share a life together. Yet life intervened in its cold, unrelenting way. Before he had the chance to send it, he enlisted in the army and was swept away, leaving our plans suspended like leaves caught in the wind. My heart ached again, a reminder that some things, once lost, are never found again. I often wondered what life would have looked like if he had returned, if the world had not transformed him into a stranger before he could find his way back to me. Every avenue I took in my life brought me closer to a kind of happiness, yet that gaping hole of what could have been never fully healed. I married, had children, and built a life filled with love, yet the absence of that first love lingered like an echo through the years. I would watch couples together, young and in love, And I would remember Robert's laughter, his warmth, and the gentle way he looked at me as though I was the sun in his sky. The love we almost had whispered to me in quiet moments, reminding me that what was lost could never be reclaimed. It was a wound left to fester, never truly closing, always a part of the fabric of my heart. As I put the letter back in its resting place, I felt an overwhelming sense of both closure and longing. The lost love was a bittersweet ghost, haunting me with the beauty of what could have been, yet allowing me to cherish the love I had found in my life. The wound may never heal entirely, but perhaps it serves as a reminder, a bittersweet note that life is full of choices, paths untaken, and moments lost to time. And while I could never reclaim Robert's unsent note, I can at least honor it, acknowledging the love that once was, even if it never reached me. As I sat in my cozy armchair, the afternoon sun filtering through the lace curtains, I couldn't shake off the strange feeling that had settled in my chest. The love letter I had uncovered weeks ago had unraveled a treasure trove of memories I thought I had hidden away for good. The words had painted vivid images of a young girl with dreams in her eyes, torn between the love she felt and the constrictions of her life. Just when I thought I had tucked those memories into the past, life had a way of throwing me a curveball I never saw coming. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when the doorbell rang. My heart skipped a beat, as it always does when there's a knock at the door. At my age, visitors are rare, and I often find myself reminiscing while flipping through old photographs or letters instead of entertaining guests. I shuffled to the door, peering through the peephole to catch a glimpse of who might be standing on the other side. To my astonishment, it was him, the man from the letter, the one who had lingered in my thoughts through all these years, a face I had once cherished and then let fade like a distant memory. As I opened the door, I could hardly believe my eyes. There he stood, aged but undeniably the same, with his silvery hair framing a face that still held the charm that had captivated me decades ago. "Is it really you, Clara?" he asked, his voice trembling with disbelief. I felt as though time had folded in on itself, and for a moment, we were young again, two souls daring to dream. We stood there, silent, as if words would shatter the fragile spell woven around us. A flood of emotions surged through me, and I struggled to reclaim the composure I thought I had mastered. We settled into my living room, the familiar old photographs taking their places on the mantel as witnesses to our reunion. He spoke of his life, his travels, the career that had taken him far from our small town, and the family he had built. I shared my own stories, the joys and heartbreaks that had colored my journey. Yet beneath the surface of our shared laughter, I sensed an unspoken weight lingering between us, the sorrow of lost time and missed opportunities. It amazed me how little had changed in our hearts, as if the years had merely added layers of wisdom over the emotions we once knew so well. Eventually, he reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. My heart pounded as he handed it to me. "I never sent this," he confessed, a hint of remorse in his eyes. The letter was yellowed with age, the edges frayed, yet my name was written in that familiar script. I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes as I realized that despite the passage of time and the lives we had led apart, the feelings were still there, waiting to be acknowledged. I opened the letter, the words rushing back to me like a long-forgotten song, a reminder of the love that had once burned brightly between us. In that moment, I knew that life was too short to let opportunities slip away again. Perhaps we couldn't rewrite the past, but we could forge a new path together, one that honored the love we had shared, even if it had been left unsaid for far too long. As we read the letter aloud, laughter and tears intermingling, I felt a warmth in my heart. Unexpectedly, a reunion had woven us back together, and as we gazed into each other's eyes, I dared to hope that it wasn't too late for second chances. I stood there, my hand trembling as I clutched the fragile pages of what had once been a diary that had slipped through the cracks of my life, lost to the passage of time and old regrets. The sun had begun to dip below the horizon, bathing my cluttered living room in a warm, golden glow. I should have felt comforted by the familiar sights and smells of home, but instead, my heart raced with a mixture of anticipation and dread. I had found it buried under years of mementos, a yellowed book that contained not just the fragments of my past, but a love letter destined never to reach me. As I turned the yellowed pages, memories rushed back. Each word was like a ghost, whispering to me from another time, another version of myself. I could almost see him, the boy with the sparkling eyes and laughter that stirred something alive in me. I could feel the weight of the unsent letter pressing down on my chest, a heavy reminder of all I had lost, what might have been. I could picture the moments I had withheld my truth, convincing myself that love could wait, that there would be a better time to express it. Yet here I was, decades later, grappling with the realization that time had run out for so many of us. In that stillness, a well of emotion rose to the surface, aching and raw. I could picture myself as that girl, standing on the threshold of my youth, paralyzed by fear and doubt. The words of the letter echoed in my mind, confessing feelings I never voiced, dreams I never pursued. What had I been afraid of? His disappointment? My own inadequacies? I had buried those feelings so deep, thinking that time would heal the wounds, that distance would diminish the longing. But instead, it had festered, leaving me with a profound sense of loss. I wished I could go back to that moment, to find my voice and speak my heart. But alas, life doesn't grant such wishes. As the sun dipped lower, the shadows danced around me, and I felt an urge surging within. I needed to confront this unresolved part of my life, to finally release the emotions I had held captive for far too long. I closed my eyes and imagined him standing before me, the boy who had taken my heart without even knowing. I envisioned telling him everything, the fear, the struggles, the love that had remained unsaid. The air felt electric with the weight of my unspoken words. They had been locked away inside me, wrapped tightly in years of silence, but now they bubbled to the surface like an unstoppable tide. I opened my eyes, a surge of defiance rising within me. In that moment, surrounded by my past and confronting my regrets, I made a choice. I would no longer let fear dictate the terms of my life. I would honor that young girl who had once loved so boldly but had been silenced by the demands of reality. I took a deep breath and began to speak aloud, letting the words spill over like the floodgates had finally opened. I spoke to him, to the ghost of the love that had slipped through my fingers, releasing the weight of the unsaid. Finally, in that dim light, I allowed myself the emotional release I had denied for so long. The tears flowed freely down my cheeks, carrying with them the burden of lost time, but also a strange sense of liberation. It was never too late to confront the ghosts of our past. Even if love remained unsent, it could still find its voice. I sat in my sitting room, the afternoon sun filtering through the lace curtains, casting gentle patterns on the faded carpet. I had been organizing boxes of old letters and photographs when I stumbled upon that small, weathered envelope. It had no address, just my name written in a familiar script that once made my heart flutter. The words, "To my dearest," greeted me, and I knew immediately it was another letter from him, David. Even after all these years, just the sight of his handwriting sent memories flooding back like an unexpected tide. As I carefully unfolded the fragile paper, I felt the weight of unspoken words. The letter detailed his thoughts during those long summer evenings we spent together. He reminisced about our laughter, our dreams of what life could be, and the plans we envisioned, plans that seemed so plausible back then. But as I read on, a knot formed in my stomach. It quickly became clear that this letter was never sent. His words danced around commitments and fears, revealing a man who was grappling with his own uncertainties. There was a raw honesty in his writing, an emotional vulnerability that struck me deeply. I could almost hear his voice resonating with fondness, tinged with regret. It felt like he was right there with me, asking me to understand his choices. In that moment, I wished I could reach through time and assure him that my heart was open, ready to embrace whatever future lay ahead. But life had its way of twisting paths, and the choices we made, or didn't make, affected everything that followed. I felt an ache for the time we lost, for the moments that could have been if only we had found the courage to be vulnerable with each other. Sitting in that moment, I could almost feel the weight of the years pressing down on me. The unfulfilled dreams and unanswered questions gnawed at my heart. Why hadn't I reached out? Why had I allowed the silence to grow between us? In the quiet of my living room, the echoes of our youth rang louder than the clock ticking on the wall. I placed the letter on my lap, staring at those smudged ink trails that held so much unexpressed love. It was as if the universe had conspired to keep us apart, and yet that was not entirely true. We had choices, and for whatever reasons, fear, pride, or a simple misunderstanding, we let them slip through our fingers. Then, a sudden urge coursed through me. What if I could reach out to him, or at least send a message? I had his address. I remembered it well. It had been years since I last thought to write, but the thought gripped me with a fierce determination. I could write a letter in response to his unsent words. Would it be too late to express all that had been left unsaid? As I pondered the possibility, I felt a flicker of hope illuminating the shadows of regret. Perhaps this was my chance to reclaim a piece of the love that felt lost to time. It wouldn't change the past, but it could mend some of the fractures in my heart. With trembling hands, I picked up a pen, ready to write the letter I had longed to send all those years ago. As I sifted through the pages of my grandmother's lost diary, a strange blend of emotions unfurled within me. Each entry seemed to echo the past. My family's voices lingering in the margins, fainter than I remembered but profoundly influential. I often wondered how they would react to my discovery of the unsent love letter, which sat nestled between the fragile sheets. Would they understand the weight of my revelation? Or would they dismiss it as a mere relic, unworthy of the present-day concerns? After all, family dynamics have a way of folding in on themselves, and my grandmother's secret likely revealed more than just her heart's desires. It illuminated the cultural confines that shaped our lives. Growing up, I often found myself tucked away in conversations where love and duty lived in an unbreakable partnership. My parents, a product of their time, had woven their expectations tightly around me, leaving little room for whims or what-ifs. There was a sense of obligation to uphold the family name, to marry into a well-respected lineage, and to continue the traditions that echoed through the generations. So, when I stumbled across this love letter, I couldn't help but think about my grandmother's life. How her passion was silenced by societal expectations, much like my own had been, only a few decades later. Would my family see her for the woman she was behind those constraints? Or would they view her as a relic of an era that had long passed? The letter was penned to a man whose name I did not recognize, but the longing in her words was palpable. She had entrusted her feelings to paper as if it were her only sanctuary, a private retreat from the world that demanded so much of her. I could almost hear her voice whispering in my ear, the sweet cadence of longing peppered with regret. What would my mother think if she knew her mother had once penned such a fiery testament of love? Would she admire her courage? Or would she chastise her for loving beyond the bounds of propriety? That dichotomy tugged at my heart, revealing how complicated love could be when viewed through the lens of family. As I contemplated the implications of this letter, I felt a sense of solidarity with my grandmother. Her pain, her unfulfilled dreams, mirrored my own encounters with love and loss. The critical glances, the whispered conversations over family dinners about what was appropriate, played out in her life just as they had in mine. It made me wonder if anyone had ever taken a moment to consider her happiness over her obligations and her fears. The societal expectations that dictated her actions had embedded themselves in the fabric of our family, stretching across generations and shaping us into what we were. Ironically, it felt as if this long-lost part of her story was trying to break free from those very bindings, begging to be acknowledged. I decided then that I could not keep this discovery to myself. My heart ached to share it with my mother, to peel back the layers of our family history and reveal the struggles that masqueraded as simple choices. Perhaps in doing so, I could finally give voice to the unsaid truths that lingered in shadows. It was vital to show her that love, genuine and unbridled, could exist within the confines of expectation and duty. It was vital to illuminate my grandmother's unrealized dreams and allow her story to breathe life into our own. In this act of connection, I hope to bridge the gap between generations and offer a glimmer of understanding that our family's narrative is not just about adherence to tradition, but about recognizing the sacrifices made for love that dared not speak its name. As I sat in my old armchair, sunlight streaming through the window, I found myself once again immersed in the pages of my grandmother's diary. The yellowing pages spoke of a time long gone, where ink and paper were the main vessels for conveying emotions. This particular passage, penned in her elegant script, detailed a love that seemed so immediate and intense, yet also painfully distant from my own life. The ink had faded, but the feelings echoed loudly, reminding me of my own youthful dreams that had gone unfulfilled. It struck me then how often we dismiss our past in the rush of life, how we let those emotions slip through our fingers like grains of sand, never to be grasped again. I turned the pages gingerly, feeling each crack and crease as I navigated through her memories. My heart raced as I came across a letter that, it seemed, had never reached its intended recipient. It was addressed to a man named Samuel, who had captured her heart in a way I could only imagine. There were powerful emotions infused into every sentence, words strung together like a melody only she could hear. The yearning seeped from the page, pulling me into the depths of her hopes and fears. It felt familiar, like a ghost of my own past, whispering the stories of love that never fully blossomed in my life. Reading those words stirred something deep within me. I couldn't help but draw parallels between my grandmother's unfulfilled longing and my own. My heart ached as I recalled the kind of love I always yearned for, but never quite found. It led me to question the choices I had made and the love letters I never sent. Those moments, filled with doubt and fear, had kept me from taking risks. I had tucked my feelings away in corners of my heart, believing the lie that perhaps love was not meant for me. As I contemplated my grandmother's unspoken love, I realized how precious time is. Each unwritten letter, each missed opportunity felt like a brick weighing down my spirit. What struck me most was the realization that my grandmother's life was not just a series of events marked by time, but a tapestry of emotions left hanging in the air. She had written so passionately, yet she had never sent the letter. It became clear to me that life isn't solely about the grand gestures or the perfect moments that we chase. Sometimes it unfolds in the quiet, unvoiced emotions that linger under the surface. My grandmother had poured her heart into those pages, and while they were never sent, they mattered. They told a story of love untried, of hopes that were as real as any fulfilled romance. In that moment, I made a vow to redefine my own relationship with love and vulnerability. If life had taught me anything, it was that we cannot afford to let our feelings remain dormant. As I placed the diary back on the shelf, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. The love letters I had never written, the words I had never spoken, were holding me captive in a prison of regret. I realized that it isn't too late to embrace the sentiments I've shied away from. Just as my grandmother had whispered her heart into those pages, I too could find the courage to reach out and connect with the love that had always been waiting for me, patiently urging me to rediscover it. As I sifted through the remnants of my life, a mixture of nostalgia and regret washed over me with every forgotten trinket I unearthed. It was both unsettling and oddly comforting to revisit the echoes of my youth. Each letter and photograph stirred a memory, a relationship long past, and with it, a realization that I had never truly let go of some of the people who shaped me. Among the old letters, the one that caught my eye was not addressed to me, but rather one I had written, a love letter never sent. It was a fragile reminder of what could have been, a thread of connection to the person I had once cherished. I had met Jonathan on a crisp autumn afternoon when the world was bursting with colors. He had a laugh that could shatter my gloom and a smile that felt like home. We spent hours exploring the nearby woods, our hands brushing against each other in what felt like a sacred promise. But life has a way of complicating even the purest bonds. His family moved, and just like that, the universe conspired to pull us apart. I never got the chance to share my feelings with him, to let him know how much he meant to me. Instead, I tucked my emotions into that letter, hiding it away in the pages of my diary, and let time slip through my fingers. As I read the words I had written so many years ago, a bittersweet ache settled in my heart. It was as if I were a stranger reliving a moment that belonged to someone else. I had poured out my soul onto that paper, articulating dreams and wishes that would never materialize. It was a confession that spoke of love's fleeting nature, a desperate hope that he would one day understand just how deeply he had affected my life. There was no mention of regret in the letter, just pure, unadulterated affection. But life went on, and both of us found our paths diverged in ways that had nothing to do with choice. Finding that letter made me rethink the nature of love itself. It was not just about the connection we had, but about the space we created for one another. Jonathan had been a part of my world, albeit briefly, yet he left behind an imprint that never faded. I understood now that sometimes resolution doesn't mean reconciliation. It's about finding peace with what was and allowing oneself to grow beyond the what-ifs. I realized that even though our romantic story had no conclusion, it was still significant. It shaped me, taught me about vulnerability, and prepared me for the relationships that followed. In the end, I decided to keep that letter close as a reminder. It wasn't just a testament to what could have been. It was also a lesson in acceptance. I felt grateful for the love I had experienced, no matter how ephemeral. It reminded me that love takes many forms, and sometimes the most profound connections happen in silence across the vastness of time and distance. I may never see Jonathan again, but I could honor our past, carrying his memory within me while still embracing the future that awaited. As I closed the diary, I knew that I would continue to write my story, enriched by the threads of love I had woven throughout my life, each one meaningful in its own right. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting golden rays through my kitchen window, illuminating the dust motes that danced in the late afternoon light. I sat at the table, my hands wrapped around a steaming mug of chamomile tea, the warmth radiating through my fingers. It felt comforting, but it was nothing compared to the wave of nostalgia that washed over me as I stared at the familiar envelope on the table. It was the letter I had found hidden beneath the floorboards, the letter I had read not once, but countless times since discovering it. Somehow, it encapsulated all the uncrossed paths of my life, all the loves that had slipped through my fingers like sand. As I sat there, I recalled the vibrant times of my youth, those heart-fluttering moments filled with laughter and whispered secrets. But here I was, decades later, feeling the weight of unfulfilled dreams. The letter had been written by a man I had once loved dearly, a fleeting romance marked by stolen glances and the soft touch of hands brushing against one another. He never sent it, and while I had moved on, married, had children, and embraced the chaos of life, I couldn't shake the feeling that this letter was a tether back to a part of my life that had been left unsaid. Each word seemed to echo with the unspoken thoughts I had yearningly harbored. I decided it was time for a final gesture, a way to reconcile the past with the present. I took a deep breath, feeling the air fill my lungs, and picked up my pen. I began to write a letter of my own, an unsent response to his words that had lingered in my heart. I poured out my thoughts, the memories of our time together, and everything I wished I could have said when it mattered. I remembered the way he had looked at me, with eyes that saw past the surface and into the depth of my soul. I wrote about how I had loved him, how I had hoped that love would grow into something more, yet life had taken us in different directions. With each stroke of my pen, I realized how much this act meant to me. It wasn't just about reconciling my past. It was a way to honor the love we had shared, however brief. I wanted to acknowledge that it had been real, that it had shaped me into the person I am today, though I had never given it the space it deserved. The weight of lost time felt slightly lighter as I captured my words on paper. I had spent years burying those feelings deep within me, but now it was liberating to let them emerge in ink, to give them life in a way that could be shared, even if only with myself. Once I finished, I hesitated, staring at the page that contained my heart laid bare. My eyes misted with emotion, and I took the envelope that had once held his letter, carefully slipping my response inside. It felt like closure, a full circle moment. Perhaps somewhere in the universe, he would feel the warmth of my words, a gentle acknowledgement of what was and what could have been. I took a moment to reflect on how love does not always present itself in grand gestures or perfect endings. Sometimes it resides in the quiet corners of the heart, waiting patiently, needing only a final gesture to remind us that it was ever real. As I sealed the envelope, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. It was no longer about regret, but rather acceptance. Acceptance of the journey, of love cherished and lost, and of the lessons learned along the way. I knew one day I would place that letter safely among my keepsakes, a reminder that love, even when unsent, never truly disappears. In that moment, I understood that I had given my past the recognition it deserved, and within that, I found solace. I sit in my favorite chair, the fabric worn and softened over the years, and I feel the weight of time pressing against my shoulders like an old friend. The letter, that elusive love letter I stumbled upon, still lingers in my mind like a tune I can't quite exit. I've spent countless hours turning it over in my thoughts, exploring the landscapes of what could have been, how a few misplaced words or a fateful twist of fate might have altered the trajectory of my life. It was signed with a name that fluttered my heart, but it didn't come to me. And as I've learned, unspoken feelings can sometimes echo louder than the spoken ones. As I trace the lines of my memories, I recall the sense of summer afternoons spent by the riverbank where we used to play, his laughter ringing in my ears like music that never quite fades. We were young and foolish, filled with dreams that were as wide as the horizon and just as unreachable. Yet, amidst our shared laughter and innocent glances, there was always a shroud of uncertainty, a veil that kept us from stepping into the light of what could have been a beautiful love story. I wonder if he ever knew how much I cherished those moments, how his absence has woven itself into the fabric of my new narrative, a tale of missed opportunities and silent heartaches. Each choice I made thereafter was tinged with that letter's ghost, guiding my decisions in ways I couldn't fully understand at the time. How many times did I let fear steer me away from love, believing that heartbreak was easier to bear than the joy of risking it? I filled my life with things that should have made me feel full, a family, friendships, accomplishments, but there was always a corner of my heart that remained untouched. Every anniversary of my wedding felt like a reminder of what I didn't have, an unfulfilled chapter that never found its audience. Sometimes I would catch myself gazing out the window, wondering what paths my life could have taken had courage been my companion instead of apprehension. Yet, in this reflection, I find a strength I didn't know I possessed. I have loved fiercely, albeit differently than I initially imagined. My husband, who never ceased to be my steady anchor, taught me that love isn't merely a romantic notion. It can be a deep-rooted bond sewn into the everyday acts of kindness and support. While part of me mourns the lost letter, its words that never reached my eager heart, another part feels empowered by the realization that love in its various forms shaped me, formed a mosaic of experiences that have brought me to this moment. I understand now that love doesn't always narrate itself in grand gestures, but often whispers through the mundane, tender moments that catch you off guard. I sit here, surrounded by memories, with the echo of his laughter still dancing in my mind. I no longer carry the burden of longing with the same weight. Instead, it sits beside me, an old companion who reminds me of the importance of living authentically. The strength I've gathered over the years suggests that I have nothing left to regret. Should the universe ever conspire to reunite me with my long-lost love, I would greet him as one might an old photograph, filled with warmth but content in the knowledge that my journey has been uniquely mine. As I close my eyes and take a deep breath, I embrace the beauty of my own narrative, a testament to love unsent yet profoundly felt, still vibrant, still alive, ever etched in the story of who I am. As I sit here, the sun dipping low and casting warm hues across the room, I find a strange comfort in the bittersweet nature of my revelations. That diary, with its fragile pages and faded ink, held a piece of my heart that was tucked away for far too long. I had thought that love was something we grasped tightly, that it was a tangible thing we could carry with us, but now I see it differently. Love, in its truest form, is a gentle whisper, a lingering fragrance, a shadow that dances alongside us even when we cannot touch it. I have learned that sometimes the letters we never received carry the deepest of sentiments, those that remain unspoken yet resonate profoundly within our souls. They remind me that love is not always about possession. Sometimes it is about letting go. I have come to embrace the losses and the longings as parts of my journey, each one a thread woven into the fabric of my life. As I reflect on the moments that have shaped me, I feel an overwhelming sense of gratitude for every laugh shared, for every tear shed, and for every love that has touched my heart, even those that slipped through my fingers. Each experience has been a chapter, a story that has brought me to this quiet moment of acceptance. If you listened until the end, thank you. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. Maybe the next story we tell here will be yours.